Now, for the last few weeks, we've heard a lot about illegal immigration, or asylum seekers, depending on what your politics are. This graph here has been central to the discussion. It shows that from April last year through to January this year, encounters on the southern border rose from 17 to 78,000 people per month. And then this month, they cracked 100,000. Look, obviously, this is not all Joe Biden's doing here, although the punditry might suggest otherwise.
By the open border policies.
Open border radicals.
The Biden open borders amnesty agenda.
That's an open border strategy.
But here's what you're not hearing. Out of the 100,000 migrants taken at the border last month, 72,000 of them were instantly deported under Title 42. That's essentially a COVID protection rule. That's 72% rejected instantly. Whereas under Trump, it was about 90% rejected using the same rules. So look, these two numbers are a little different, but it's not quite...
The Biden open borders amnesty agenda.
So what's the real difference under Biden? Well, Trump promised he'd process asylum seekers if they waited in Mexico. They're the remain in Mexico people, but he stopped doing so, whereas Biden has processed 1,500 of them in about a month. Also, Mexico is no longer taking families with young kids, so Biden is taking them as well. And Biden's taking all unaccompanied children. That's the tricky one there, we'll come back to that. But the biggest difference might simply be Biden's new tone.
The idea that a more humane policy would be in place may have driven people to make that decision, but perhaps more importantly, it definitely drove smugglers to spread disinformation about what was now possible.
Well, whatever the reason, something has definitely happened, because migrants are saying things like, Biden promised us that everything was gonna change. People are literally turned up to the border in Biden shirts, even though almost all of those people are going to get rejected. And literally 25% of the migrants encountered in February were people who had been rejected under Trump, but decided to have another crack under Biden. Now, the administration's trying to combat this open borders reputation with a no-nonsense, not at all confusing message like this.
Así que yo creo que es muy importante subrayar el caso que la frontera no está cerrada y el viaje es muy peligroso y la gente realmente no debían llegar a los Estados Unidos en una manera irregular ahora.
Well, that was a screw-up, wasn't it? But regardless, Biden's got some problems. Firstly, where are you going to put the kids? Unlike that first graph I showed you, there's been a huge jump in unaccompanied minors turning up under Biden. Obviously, they know that he's going to let them in. Their numbers almost doubled in February, and they're still on the rise. They went from 47 kids arriving per day in early January to 203 arriving per day in late January to 321 arriving per day in late February to 565 arriving per day last week. And that has led to the HHS shelters where these kids are being processed for their permanent home to run out of room. They have tried to respond by removing COVID space restrictions and filling them right to the top, but so far it's not making a huge difference. So, when you've got a bottleneck here, the numbers of children in these temporary dodgy border protection facilities obviously start to build up. Remember, people didn't like those border protection facilities very much under Trump, or under Obama for that matter, yet as of Sunday, there were more than 4,200 children in those dodgy temporary facilities, when under Trump, there'd never been more than 2,600 children in those facilities. Now, admittedly, children aren't in cages anymore because the cages have been closed for renovations. Where they are being held, though, is not much better. Take the Donner complex. That's currently holding more than 1,800 people, even though it's designed for 250 people. A lawyer who talked to the boys there said it was so overcrowded the kids had to take turns sleeping on the floor. One of the boys said he could only see the sun when he showered, And that's a shame because some kids only got to shower once in 7 days. And note, we got no photos at all of that facility because the Biden administration won't let anyone take them. When asked about these conditions, Jen Psaki didn't even try to deny it.
Children being hungry, sleeping on the floor, not being allowed outside for days at a time. Why is that acceptable to go on even for one more day? Why is that something that's not being outlawed right now? How is the administration not stopping that today?
Well, Yamisha, it's not acceptable. But I think the challenge here is that there are not that many options.
And to be fair, that is true. They are short of options. Border Protection is legally obligated to transfer kids out of those facilities after 72 hours. But there's nowhere else for them to go. So about 3,000 of the 4,200 kids there have been longer there than 72 hours. In fact, on average, they're there for 117 hours. More than 100 of them have been there for longer than 10 days. So these so-called temporary shelters are becoming less temporary. And let's not forget also that kids arriving with grandparents, siblings or other relatives are being separated from them until they've been vetted, and that can take weeks or even months. So there are separated families in those facilities as well. That's the kids. There's been concerns about adults as well. Namely that more than 420 of the detainees currently have COVID. But many get released into the community anyway because ICE doesn't have the authority to keep them detained once they've been processed. That's true. But look, given America has literally 7 million active COVID cases, a few hundred more, probably not a big deal. What is more of a concern though is that while the system's massively under strain, there are heaps of illegal immigrants not getting caught. On just one day last month, one day, they saw 1,000 people getting away on their surveillance cameras. Small border towns are reporting a dozen high-speed chases every week in each town. And nationwide drug seizures increased 50% from January to February, including an increase of 48% in heroin seizures. All this when the last time there was this kind of migrant surge, the numbers doubled again between February and May. So is this what the next 3 months looks like? We'll see.